Women systematically underestimate their own abilities. If you test men and women and you ask them questions on totally objective criteria, like GPAs, men get it wrong slightly high, and women get it wrong slightly low. Women do not negotiate for themselves in the workforce. A study in the last 2 years of people entering the workforce out of college showed that 57% of boys entering, or men, I guess, are negotiating for salary, and only 7% of women. And most importantly, men attribute their success to themselves and women attribute it to other external factors. If you ask men why they did a good job, they'll say, "I'm awesome." If you ask, obviously, "Why are you even asking?" If you ask women why they did a good job, what they'll say is someone helped them, they got lucky, they worked really hard. Why does this matter? Boy, it matters a lot. Because no one gets to the corner office by sitting on the side, not at the table, and no one gets the promotion if they don't think they deserve their success, or they don't even understand their own success.
I'm fascinated by the extent to which sharing economy platforms like Uber and Airbnb are getting Americans to trust each other again. Over the last 40 years, the level of trust in society has fallen quite dramatically. Less than 1 in 5 Americans under the age of 35 today feel that people are trustworthy in general. But in parallel, we've developed a heightened level of trust in strangers who we meet through a digital interface. There's a generation that has grown up reading Yelp reviews, reading Amazon reviews, making their consumption choices based on what strangers on a digital platform say. And so someone who we interact with who comes accompanied by online reviews, a Facebook and LinkedIn profile, and other digital cues seems to be someone we'll trust at the level of friends and family. What excites me about this transition is that through history, every time society has created a new basis for trust, it has expanded the economy dramatically. So I'm looking forward to seeing, as we trust our Uber drivers more, how this expands the world's economic activities and the possibilities for trade.
The Travels of Sir John Mandeville first saw the light of day in the mid-13th century and states in the introduction that it's intended as a guidebook for pilgrims venturing to the Holy Land. Unfortunately, most of the guidebook information is wildly out of date. The Travels of John Mandeville, despite posing as a guidebook, is actually just a sort of combination of 11th and 12th century sources. Mandeville ripped pieces from one source, bits from another, and put them together in a big melting pot and one continuous narrative. A storyteller at heart, Mandeville quickly leaves the guidebook behind and starts spinning tales. Now, based on events described within the Travels of John Mandeville, we can say fairly definitively that it was written after 1360, which would seem to jive with the 1366 date that Mandeville gifts for when he finished his narrative. Now, while there is no original manuscript known to survive, we do have a very early copy from 1371. It was written in French, although it's heavily peppered with Anglicanism, suggesting that the book was written in English initially and later translated to French. The 15th century copy of the work says it was originally written in Latin, translated into French and then translated into English that it might reach men of all parts of the world, but this seems to be a much later edition. The work was quickly translated into all the dialects and languages of Europe: French, Spanish, Dutch, German, Bohemian and even Gaelic. We have 3 early English manuscripts, although they're all post-1400, but to give something of an indication of how popular Mandeville's work was. We do have over 300 surviving manuscripts versions of the Travels of John Mandeville, as opposed to only 77 of Marco Polo. Now, all of this is in an aged pre-Gutenberg, so that should give you some sort of indication of just exactly how much these works spread. The glass ceiling is an idea familiar to many. It refers to the invisible barrier that seems to exist in many fields and which prevents women from achieving senior positions. Less well known, but arguably a more pernicious problem, is the glass cliff. Originally recognized by academics Michelle Ryan and Alex Haslam back in 2005, this is the phenomenon of women making it to the boardroom but finding themselves disproportionately represented in untenable leadership positions. Ryan and Haslam presented evidence that women were indeed starting to secure seats at boardroom tables. But the problem was that their positions were inherently unstable. These women would then find themselves in an unsustainable leadership position from which they would be ousted with evidence of apparent failure. The title of their paper sums it up: Women are overrepresented in precarious leadership positions. Subsequent research in an array of environments has demonstrated that this is not an isolated issue, nor is it unique to certain industries or geographical locations. It reveals that women in top leadership positions seem to be routinely handed inherently unsolvable problems.
In today's class, We'll be examining some 19th century pattern books that were used for building houses. I think it's fair to say that these pattern books were the most important influence on the design of North American houses during the 19th century. This was because most people who wanted to build a house couldn't afford to hire an architect. Instead, they bought a pattern book, picked out a plan, and took it to the builder. The difference in cost was substantial. In 1870, for example, hiring an architect would have cost about $100. At the same time, a pattern book written by an architect costs only $5. At that price, it's easy to see why pattern books were so popular. Some are back in print again today, and of course, they cost a lot more than they did 100 years ago. But they're an invaluable resource for historians, and also for people who restore old houses. I have a modern reprint here that I'll be passing around the room in a moment so that everyone can have a look.
For many, these have been vital considerations for the future of artificial intelligence. But British computer scientist Alan Turing decided to disregard all these questions. in favor of a much simpler one: can a computer talk like a human? This question led to an idea for measuring artificial intelligence that would famously come to be known as the Turing test. In the 1950 paper, Computing Machinery and Intelligence, Turing proposed the following game. A human judge has a text conversation with unseen players and evaluates their responses. To pass the test, a computer must be able to replace one of the players without substantially changing the results. In other words, a computer would be considered intelligent if its conversation couldn't be easily distinguished from a human's. Turing predicted that by the year 2000, machines with 100 megabytes of memory would be able to easily pass his test. But he may have jumped the gun.